Imagine standing in a museum, gazing at the hard stone of a fossil, when suddenly you realize you are looking at the final moment of a creature's life. Not just evidence that it lived, but the exact split second when it died. Frozen in time, these dramatic finales tell stories so profound, so intimate, that they blur the line between paleontology and poetry. They are windows into days millions of years ago when ordinary creatures faced extraordinary ends. Death so bizarre, so perfectly preserved, that they fundamentally changed what we thought possible in the fossil record. These are not just skeletons. They are crime scenes from deep time. The first time Dr. Victoria Ramirez encountered the fighting dinosaurs fossil at an international conference in 2006, she stopped breathing for a moment. A velociraptor and a protoceratops locked in mortal combat, their bodies entangled as they were buried alive by a sudden sandstorm or collapsing dune some 80 million years ago. The velociraptor's sickle claw is embedded in the herbivore's neck, while the protoceratops has the carnivore's right arm clamped in its beak. "This is not just a fossil," she whispered to her colleague. "This is a story, frozen in the middle of its most dramatic scene." While fossils traditionally show us the architecture of ancient life, bones, teeth, occasionally skin impressions, these rare death fossils reveal behavior, relationships, and ecological dramas playing out in real time. They are snapshots of actual moments, preserved through extraordinary circumstances that paleontologists call exceptional preservation. But how do we know these truly represent death moments? How can science distinguish between a creature that died in a certain position versus one that was arranged that way after death? And what does it take for a dying moment to be preserved across millions of years? The answers lie at the intersection of taphonomy, the study of how organisms decay and become fossilized, geology, and a bit of forensic detective work. For a death moment to be preserved, several unlikely events must occur simultaneously. Rapid burial, minimal disturbance, and specific chemical conditions that allow mineralization before decomposition erases the evidence. Think of it as nature's perfect crime scene preservation, explains Dr. Alejandra Patterson, taphonomist at Cambridge University. Except instead of police tape, you need a sudden mudslide, volcanic ash, or quicksand. And instead of hours, you need to seal the evidence within minutes or hours. What makes these fossils so scientifically valuable is that they capture behavior, the most elusive aspect of extinct creatures. We can reconstruct a dinosaur skeletal system from scattered bones, but how it lived, how it interacted, how it died, these questions usually remain in the realm of speculation. Death fossils provide rare empirical evidence of these behaviors, allowing paleontologists to test hypotheses about ancient ecological relationships. But more than scientific significance, these fossils possess a haunting emotional resonance. They connect us to individual lives ended long ago in specific, often dramatic circumstances. They remind us that the prehistoric world was not an abstract concept but a reality filled with living, breathing beings experiencing their final moments, just as real as we are today. What follows are 8 of the most bizarre, scientifically important, and emotionally powerful death fossils ever discovered, each one challenging our understanding of the past and offering unprecedented glimpses into the most private moment any creature ever experiences. Its ending. The dueling dinosaurs. Locked in combat for 80 million years, the Mongolia Gobi Desert, 1971. A Polish-Mongolian expedition uncovers what would become one of paleontology's most dramatic fossils. A velociraptor and protoceratops frozen in combat. The carnivorous velociraptor has its killing claw embedded in the neck of the plant-eating protoceratops, which has the predator's arm gripped in its beak. Both died in this position, possibly buried by a collapsing sand dune during their life-or-death struggle. Dr. Victor Reynolds, who spent 3 years studying the specimen, explains the significance. This fossil doesn't just tell us these species were contemporaries. It shows us their relationship. The velociraptor wasn't just theoretically capable of attacking a larger herbivore. We can see it actually happened. And more importantly, we can see the protoceratops fighting back, challenging our assumptions about predator-prey dynamics. What makes this fossil so extraordinary is not just that it captures a predator-prey interaction, but that it shows us the protoceratops was not passive prey. The placement of its beak around the velociraptor's arm suggests it was actively defending itself, possibly even winning the encounter before both animals were buried. The positioning reveals something else surprising. Velociraptors likely used their famous curved claws in a pulling, slashing motion rather than simply stabbing downward as often depicted in popular media. The Protoceratops, meanwhile, appears to have used its parrot-like beak as a defensive weapon, not just a plant processing tool. It's a frozen moment of evolutionary arms race, says Reynolds. The predator's specialized weaponry versus the prey's defensive adaptations, all captured in a single frame of Earth's history. Taphonomic analysis suggests the sand burial happened within minutes of their struggle. Had there been any significant delay, the animals would have separated or been positioned differently by environmental factors or scavengers. The completeness of both skeletons and the tension in their postures indicates they were alive at the moment of burial. But beyond scientific value lies something more profound. As paleontologist Dr. Amira Patel notes, there's something deeply moving about seeing their final moment. These weren't just abstract species but individuals. Perhaps a young velociraptor hunting to feed its first offspring, or a Protoceratops defending its territory. We'll never know their specific stories, but we know they fought fiercely until the very end. The fossil has sparked debates about velociraptor behavior. Was this a routine hunting strategy or a desperate attack? Was the Protoceratops an intended prey, or did the velociraptor miscalculate the herbivore's defensive capabilities? Some paleontologists even suggest the Protoceratops might have been the aggressor, defending a nest or territory against a velociraptor that wandered too close. Analysis of the surrounding sediments reveals that this death struggle occurred during the late Cretaceous period in what was then a semi-arid environment with seasonal rainfall, not unlike modern savannas. This environmental context helps explain the sand burial but also gives us a glimpse into the challenging ecosystem these creatures inhabited. 80 million years later, their final moment continues to reveal new insights about dinosaur behavior, anatomy, and the complex ecological relationships of the Cretaceous period, all because of the perfect preservation of a single, dramatic death scene. The pregnant plesiosaur, death in the depths in 1987, near the remote cliffs of Logan County, Kansas, amateur fossil hunter Alvin Peterson stumbled upon what appeared to be yet another marine reptile fossil in the Pierre Shale Formation, a common enough find in what was once an inland sea covering much of North America. But as professional paleontologists began the careful excavation process, they realized this was no ordinary specimen. Inside the body cavity of the 15-foot adult plesiosaur lay the remains of a single, perfectly formed fetal plesiosaur, approximately one-third the size of its mother. This changed everything we thought we knew about plesiosaur reproduction, explains marine paleontologist Dr. Adrian Phillips. Until this discovery, we had assumed these marine reptiles laid eggs on beaches, like sea turtles. Instead, this fossil proved they gave live birth to developed young, a single, large offspring rather than multiple smaller ones. The fossil reveals not just reproductive strategy but a moment of dual tragedy, the death of both a mother and her unborn child. Taphonomic evidence suggests the mother died while pregnant, possibly from complications related to the pregnancy itself. The position of the fetus indicates it was not yet in the birth canal but was fully developed and likely near-term. We can see the fetus has fully formed flippers, vertebrae, and skull features. Phillips continues. It wasn't an early-stage embryo but a developed baby, ready to enter the world. The mother skeleton shows no obvious traumatic injuries, which makes us consider other causes of death, perhaps pregnancy complications or some environmental factor like harmful algal blooms that sometimes occur in shallow seas. The discovery transformed our understanding of plesiosaur biology. Live birth, viviparity, requires significant physiological adaptations compared to egg-laying. It suggests these marine reptiles may have invested substantial parental energy into single offspring, a reproductive strategy more similar to modern whales than to other reptiles. This fossil also answered a long-standing question. How did plesiosaurs, with their rigid, barrel-shaped bodies and 4 large flippers, manage to come ashore to lay eggs? The answer was simple: they didn't need to. By giving live birth in water, plesiosaurs could remain fully aquatic throughout their lives, perhaps explaining their remarkable evolutionary success across millions of years. The geological context provides additional clues about this death moment. The fine-grained limestone surrounding the fossil suggests a calm, low-oxygen environment at the bottom of the western interior seaway, perfect conditions for exceptional preservation without scavenger interference or current disturbance. What makes this fossil particularly poignant is that it captures a moment that almost happened, reflects Phillips. We're looking at a mother who never met her child, and a baby that never experienced the world outside. There's something universally moving about that, regardless of whether we're talking about humans or ancient marine reptiles. Recent microscopic analysis of the fossil has revealed even more details. Growth rings in the fetal plesiosaur's bones suggest it was nearly full-term, perhaps days or weeks from birth. The mother's skeleton shows signs of physiological stress, with thinning in certain bone structures that might indicate she was transferring calcium to her developing offspring, a process observed in modern pregnant mammals. It's a window into the biology of care, Phillips notes. Even 75 million years ago, this mother's body was making sacrifices for her offspring, diverting resources to ensure its development. That's a biological story that transcends species boundaries. Perhaps most compelling is what this fossil tells us about the evolutionary history of reproductive strategies. Viviparity has evolved independently multiple times in vertebrate history, but this example shows it occurring in one of the most specialized marine reptile lineages. It demonstrates that even in the Cretaceous period, complex reproductive adaptations were driving evolutionary success. The mother and child remained together in death as they were in life, an intimate portrait of an ancient family frozen at what should have been a beginning, not an end. The Ashfall rhinos, an ancient Pompeii for animals 11 million years ago, in what is now northeastern Nebraska, a distant supervolcano in present-day Idaho erupted with apocalyptic force. The resulting ash cloud drifted eastward, eventually settling over a savanna-like landscape populated by ancient rhinos, three-toed horses, camels, and deer-like animals. What happened next created one of the most extraordinary fossil sites on Earth, Ashfall Fossil Bed State Historical Park. Unlike most fossil sites that preserve disarticulated bones accumulated over time, Ashfall captures an entire ecosystem dying simultaneously in a prehistoric disaster. The ash layer, in some places up to 3 meters thick, shows that the ashfall continued for days or weeks. This wasn't a quick death, explains volcanologist Dr. Aaron Porter. The ash first caused respiratory distress in the animals, particularly affecting the larger mammals like the barrel-bodied rhinos. As they struggled to breathe, they gathered around the shrinking water sources, eventually collapsing where they stood. More ash continued to fall, burying them in place and preserving their death poses. What makes ashfall unique is the sequential nature of the deaths. The smaller animals died first, quickly overwhelmed by the ash. The larger rhinoceros species, Teleoceras major, lasted longer due to their greater body mass and lung capacity, but eventually succumbed as well. This created distinct layers in the fossil bed, with smaller mammals at the bottom and the rhinos on top, a timeline of extinction written in stone. The most haunting aspect of the site is the position of the rhinos. Many are found with their legs extended beneath them, heads raised upward in a posture paleontologists call the death pose. This position, struggling to keep their airways above the accumulating ash, captures their final desperate moments. We can actually see evidence of their suffering, notes taphonomist Dr. Vivian Radcliffe. Many show signs of hypertrophic pulmonary osteopathy, a condition where lung disease causes abnormal bone growth in the limbs. This tells us they didn't die immediately but suffered from ash inhalation for days before death. Perhaps most poignant are the mother-calf pairs found throughout the site. Adult female rhinos appear to have been gathered with their young when they died, suggesting maternal protection instincts at work even in these extreme circumstances. In several cases, juveniles are positioned directly alongside their presumed mothers, their bodies touching in their final moments. The chemical composition of the volcanic ash created perfect conditions for exceptional preservation. The ash contained minerals that quickly hardened around the carcasses, creating natural casts before significant decomposition could occur. This preserved not just bones but body outlines, stomach contents, and even delicate structures rarely seen in the fossil record. What we're seeing at ashfall isn't just death. It's an entire functioning ecosystem suddenly stopped in its tracks, explains paleontologist Dr. Aisha Fan. It's the Pompeii of paleontology. We can study not just what species existed, but how they interacted, what they ate, their social groupings, and their responses to an environmental catastrophe. Examination of the rhino's stomach contents reveals their last meals, grasses and other plants that help reconstruct the ancient Nebraskan savanna. Tooth where patterns show seasonal dietary adaptations. Even the spacing between individuals gives clues about social behavior in these extinct rhinoceros species. The volcanic ash itself has been geochemically fingerprinted to the Bruno Jarbidge caldera in present-day Idaho, demonstrating how far-reaching the environmental impacts of major volcanic eruptions can be. This has implications for understanding how modern supervolcanoes like Yellowstone could affect ecosystems hundreds of miles away. What's particularly striking about ashfall is how it contradicts the common misconception that fossils typically represent animals that died in water or bogs. These creatures died on dry land, in the open air, standing on the ground where they lived, their final moments preserved with extraordinary fidelity. There's something humbling about standing in the exhibition hall where the fossils remain in their original positions, reflects Porter. You're literally walking through a moment from 11 million years ago, a Tuesday afternoon, perhaps, that suddenly became these animals' last day on Earth. It reminds you how quickly environmental catastrophes can transform landscapes and extinguish life. As visitors walk the elevated platforms above the ongoing excavation at ashfall, they witness not reconstructed skeletons mounted for display, but the actual death scene as it happened. Rhinos in their death poses, preserved in their final gasps for breath, mothers alongside calves, an entire community extinguished together yet preserved forever. The fish within a fish, a meal frozen in time in 2009, at the fossil-rich Green River Formation in Wyoming, private collector Mark Greenwood split open a slab of limestone and found himself staring at one of the most perfectly preserved predation events ever discovered. A 52-million-year-old fish that died in the act of swallowing another fish. The larger predator, a species called Myoplosis labracoides, about 15 inches long, had just captured and begun to swallow a herring-like Nidea alta when both were suddenly killed and rapidly buried in the fine sediments of ancient Lake Gosiute. This fossil captures a predator literally choking on its prey, explains ichthyologist Dr. Vincent Rosario. The Nidea is positioned headfirst in the Myoplosis's throat, with about 1/3 of its body already swallowed. But it was too large for the predator to consume easily. We can actually see where the prey fish's dorsal spines appear to be stuck in the predator's throat. What makes this fossil extraordinary is the completeness of the narrative it presents. We can see not just that Myoplosis ate Nidea, a fact we might have deduced from other evidence, but exactly how the predation attempt unfolded and ultimately failed. The fossil shows the Myoplosis apparently died from its ill-fated predation attempt, making this both a hunting scene and a bizarre death record. Taphonomic evidence suggests both fish were rapidly buried in an oxygen-poor environment. The Green River Formation is known for seasonal die-offs caused by algal blooms and sudden overturns of lake water, where oxygen-depleted bottom waters rise to the surface, suffocating fish. This event likely killed the Myoplosis in mid-meal and then quickly buried both predator and prey in fine sediment. The limestone in this region formed from very fine-grained sediments that could preserve extraordinary detail. Rosario continues, we can see individual fin rays, scales, and even some soft tissue impressions in both fish. This level of preservation is what allows us to confidently interpret this as a death during predation event rather than two fish that happen to be buried near each other. Microscopic analysis of the specimen reveals additional details about the fatal encounter. The Nidea shows stress marks on its scales consistent with being compressed by the predator's jaws and throat muscles. The Myoplosis exhibits signs of asphyxiation, with gill structures suggesting a desperate attempt to increase oxygen uptake in its final moments. This fossil dramatically illustrates the ecological principle that predators face significant risks during hunting. The evolutionary pressure to capture prey must be balanced against the danger of injury or, as in this case, fatal choking. Modern predatory fish sometimes die attempting to swallow prey that is too large, a behavior pattern apparently established at least 52 million years ago. What's fascinating about this specimen is how it captures the imperfection of nature, notes evolutionary biologist Dr. Amelia Parker. We often think of predators as perfectly adapted killing machines, but this fossil shows us that miscalculations happened in the Eocene just as they do today. This myoplosis made a fatal error in attempting to consume prey that was too large for its throat diameter. The Green River Formation where this specimen was found represents an ecosystem that existed during a particularly warm period in Earth's history, the early Eocene climatic optimum. The lakes in this system supported diverse fish communities in what was then a subtropical environment with seasonal rainfall patterns. Research on modern analogs suggests the predator may have been engaged in opportunistic feeding behavior. Many predatory fish will attempt to consume the largest prey they can fit in their mouths, sometimes misjudging what they can safely swallow. This fossil provides evidence that such ecological miscalculations have deep evolutionary roots. We can actually calculate the ratio between predator size and prey size from this fossil, explains Parker. The Nidea was approximately 30% of the myoplosis's body length, apparently just beyond the threshold of what it could safely consume. This gives us quantitative data about predator-prey size relationships in this ancient ecosystem. Beyond its scientific value, the fossil resonates emotionally because it captures a universal moment. A hungry predator, an unfortunate prey, and a feeding attempt gone terribly wrong. It reminds us that the daily drama of survival and death in nature has remained fundamentally unchanged for tens of millions of years. The fossil now resides in a research collection where it continues to provide insights into ancient predator-prey relationships, feeding behaviors, and the hazards faced by predatory fish in Eocene lake ecosystems, all because of a single meal that went catastrophically wrong 52 million years ago. The Oviraptor mother, reputation redeemed after 75 million years in 1923, during the American Museum of Natural History's expedition to the Gobi Desert, paleontologist Roy Chapman Andrews discovered a toothless dinosaur skeleton positioned directly on top of what appeared to be a nest of eggs. Based on this association and the prevailing assumptions of the time, the creature was named Oviraptor Velociraptor, literally, egg thief lover of ceratopsians, under the hypothesis that it had died while raiding a Protoceratops nest. For nearly 70 years, this interpretation persisted. Oviraptor was depicted in museums and popular books as a nest robber, caught in the act of its villainy and preserved for the ages. It became paleontology's most infamous dinosaur criminal, convicted on circumstantial evidence alone. Then, in the 1990s, additional discoveries from Mongolia's Gobi Desert changed everything. It was one of paleontology's greatest plot twists, explains dinosaur reproduction expert Dr. Vincent Reeves. New specimens showed clearly that these weren't Protoceratops eggs at all. They were Oviraptor eggs. The alleged thief wasn't stealing eggs. It was protecting its own nest. What we initially interpreted as a predatory death scene was actually a parent dying while sheltering its offspring. The reinterpretation began when scientists discovered embryos inside eggs associated with Oviraptor specimens. When these embryos were studied, they proved to contain baby oviraptors, not Protoceratops. Suddenly, the narrative flipped entirely. The egg thief was actually an attentive parent that had died while brooding its nest, perhaps during a sandstorm or other rapid burial event. Further evidence came from the positioning of the adult oviraptor. It wasn't haphazardly sprawled across the eggs as one might expect if it had been surprised while raiding a nest. Instead, its limbs were symmetrically arranged around the nest in a distinctly bird-like brooding posture, with its arms spread to cover the eggs. The positioning is almost heartbreaking once you understand what you're seeing, notes paleontologist Dr. Amara Patil. This oviraptor was using its body to shelter its eggs from the elements, just as modern birds do. Its final act was one of parental care, and then it was buried, frozen in this protective posture for 75 million years, only to be misunderstood when we first found it. Microscopic examination of the nest site revealed additional details about this ancient tragedy. The arrangement of the eggs in a circular pattern with the narrow ends pointing inward is identical to nesting patterns seen in modern ground nesting birds. Sedimentological evidence suggests the nest was on a dune or sandy area that experienced a sudden burial event, possibly a sandslide or storm. The implications of this reinterpretation extend far beyond clearing one dinosaur species' reputation. It provided some of the strongest evidence yet for bird-like reproductive behaviors in theropod dinosaurs, supporting the already growing consensus about the evolutionary relationship between dinosaurs and birds. This fossil doesn't just tell us about oviraptor reproduction, it shows us behavioral evolution in action, explains Reeves. The brooding posture, the egg arrangement, the apparent nest attendance, these are all behaviors we associate with modern birds. Yet here they are in a dinosaur that lived 75 million years ago. It's a beautiful illustration of evolutionary continuity. Perhaps most significantly, the oviraptor fossil represents one of the earliest clear examples of parental care in dinosaurs. The adult was not simply guarding its territory or eggs as many reptiles do. It was physically sheltering them with its own body, a more advanced form of parental investment typically seen in birds and mammals. Recent analysis of the original specimen using advanced imaging techniques has revealed even more details. The adult's body position shows stress marks consistent with a sudden burial event while alive, suggesting it could have escaped but chose to remain with its nest instead. This adds another layer of behavioral complexity to the story. What's remarkable about this fossil is that it captures a moment of choice, reflects Patil. This oviraptor could possibly have fled whatever burial event was occurring, but it stayed with its eggs instead. That suggests a powerful parental instinct, one strong enough to override self-preservation. That's a surprisingly mammalian or avian trait to observe in a dinosaur. The vindication of oviraptor serves as a powerful reminder about the dangers of inferring behavior solely from fossil associations without additional evidence. It also demonstrates how new discoveries can completely overturn long-held scientific narratives. For 70 years, oviraptor wore the undeserved label of thief, its scientific name itself an accusation. Now we understand its final moments represented not villainy, but the ultimate parental sacrifice, dying while trying to protect its offspring from an environmental catastrophe. Its death pose, initially misinterpreted as evidence of its guilt, was actually testimony to a parent's devotion, a behavioral legacy that continues in its modern descendants, birds. The bug in amber, death caught in crystalline detail in 2013. A piece of 100-million-year-old amber from Myanmar's Kachin state arrived at the laboratory of entomologist Dr. Avery Patel. Though smaller than a postage stamp, this golden time capsule contains something remarkable. A tiny parasitoid wasp caught in the act of attacking a spiderling, with its ovipositor, the organ used to lay eggs, still inserted into its victim's body. I nearly dropped the specimen when I first viewed it under the microscope, Patel recalls. This wasn't just a preserved insect, it was a preserved behavior, a predation event in progress. We were looking at the exact moment when one creature was attacking another, both flash-frozen in time when they contacted tree resin. What makes this amber death scene so scientifically valuable is its incredible level of detail. Amber preservation can capture features at the cellular level, preserving not just hard body parts but soft tissues, colors, and even microscopic structures like individual setae, hair-like projections, on the insect's bodies. The wasp, measuring only 4.5 millimeters, belongs to a previously unknown species of the Hymenoptera order. Its victim, a juvenile spider roughly the same size, appears to have been paralyzed when both creatures became trapped in the flowing tree resin. The wasp's ovipositor is clearly visible penetrating the spider's abdomen, the first stage in what would have been a gruesome reproductive strategy. Parasitoid wasps are among nature's most disturbing creatures from our human perspective, explains Patel. Unlike true parasites that typically keep their hosts alive, parasitoids eventually kill their hosts. This wasp was attempting to inject eggs into the spider. Had it succeeded, the eggs would have hatched inside the living but paralyzed spider, and the wasp larvae would have consumed it from the inside out while it was still alive. The amber has preserved this moment in such detail that researchers can see the wasp's tensed muscles, the angle of attack, and even the spider's partially curled legs, evidence of its defensive posture cut short by encasement in resin. Microscopic bubbles around both creatures suggest they struggled briefly as the sticky resin enveloped them. Taphonomic analysis of the amber provides additional context for this death scene. The presence of particular plant debris and pollen grains embedded in the same piece suggests this event occurred in a tropical forest environment during the mid-Cretaceous period, a time when flowering plants were beginning their rise to dominance and complex insect relationships were evolving alongside them. What's particularly significant about this specimen is that it demonstrates the antiquity of this parasitoid relationship, notes evolutionary biologist Dr. Victor Rhodes. We now have direct evidence that the specialized hunting behavior of parasitoid wasps targeting spiders was already established 100 million years ago. This isn't just two random insects caught in amber. It's documentation of a specific ecological relationship that has persisted across deep time. Using advanced imaging techniques including synchrotron X-ray microtomography, researchers were able to examine the internal structures of both creatures without damaging the amber. This revealed that the wasp's venom sac was depleted, confirming it had already injected paralyzing venom into the spider before both were entombed. The preservation is so exceptional that scientists could identify specialized adaptations on the wasp's ovipositor, serrated edges and sensory structures that helped it locate and penetrate the spider's exoskeleton. These adaptations match those seen in modern parasitoid wasps, demonstrating evolutionary continuity across 100 million years. This isn't just a snapshot of death, it's a snapshot of evolutionary specialization, explains Rhodes. The precision equipment, so to speak, that this wasp is using to attack its victim represents millions of years of adaptation. And the fact that we see nearly identical structures in modern relatives tells us this was a successful evolutionary strategy that stood the test of time. Perhaps most remarkably, chemical analysis of the amber has detected trace amounts of compounds similar to those found in modern wasp venom, suggesting the potential for recovering biochemical information from specimens of this age. Though DNA is unlikely to have survived, protein fragments and other biological molecules can sometimes be preserved in amber. The amber specimen also captures something rarely seen in the fossil record: a failed predation attempt. Had the wasp completed its attack successfully, it would have flown away, leaving the paralyzed spider to serve as an unwilling incubator for its offspring. Instead, both predator and prey were caught in a third death trap, the flowing tree resin that would eventually fossilize into amber. There's a certain poetic justice in this scene, reflects Patel. The wasp, specialized to deliver a slow, horrible fate to its victim, instead finds itself trapped alongside its prey. Neither the hunter nor the hunted would survive this encounter, but their relationship would be preserved for humans to discover 100 million years later. This tiny amber window into ancient behavior continues to yield new insights as technology advances. Recent studies using confocal laser scanning microscopy have revealed previously undetected details about the neural anatomy of the wasp, providing clues about the sensory capabilities that guided its hunting behavior. In a single, golden droplet smaller than a coin, we see an entire ecological relationship preserved: predator and prey, adaptation and counteradaptation, attack and defense, all captured in the final microseconds of both creatures' lives, allowing us to witness an intimate moment from the age of dinosaurs with crystalline clarity. The entombed ichthyosaur mother, death during birth in 2009, at the Holzmaden shale deposits in southern Germany, paleontologists uncovered a fossil that simultaneously represented both a beginning and an end, an ichthyosaur mother that died in the process of giving birth. The 180-million-year-old specimen shows the mother's skeleton with one baby already delivered outside her body, a second caught halfway through the birth canal, and several more unborn young still within her abdominal cavity. This is one of paleontology's most poignant fossils, explains marine reptile specialist Dr. Victoria Rayleigh. We're witnessing the most universal of all biological processes, birth, transformed into a death scene. The mother died midway through delivery, her final act one of reproduction cut tragically short. Ichthyosaurs were dolphin-like marine reptiles that dominated ocean ecosystems during much of the Mesozoic era. Unlike many reptiles, they gave birth to live young in water, an adaptation that eliminated the need to return to land to lay eggs. This reproductive strategy allowed ichthyosaurs to become fully aquatic, but as this fossil dramatically illustrates, live birth carried its own risks. The fossil is exceptional not just for capturing the birth process but for the completeness of both mother and offspring. The mother measures approximately 3.5 meters long, while the babies are each about 0.5 meters in length. All skeletons show excellent articulation and preservation, suggesting rapid burial in the oxygen-poor mud of what was then a stagnant sea basin. What's particularly striking about this specimen is the position of the partially birthed juvenile, notes Rayleigh. Its emerging tail first from the mother's body, which tells us something crucial about ichthyosaur birth strategies. Modern cetaceans, whales, and dolphins also give birth tail first to prevent the newborn from drowning during a prolonged delivery. This fossil confirms ichthyosaurs used the same approach, a case of convergent evolution driven by the challenges of aquatic birth. Taphonomic evidence provides clues about what might have gone wrong during this ancient birth. The halfway delivered baby appears wedged at an awkward angle, suggesting it may have become stuck during delivery, a tragic case of ancient dystocia or difficult birth. This complication, combined with the stress of delivery, likely caused the mother's death. The unborn babies, still waiting their turn for delivery, perished with her. The geological context of the Holzmaden deposits adds another dimension to the story. These shales formed during a time of periodic oxygen depletion in the early Jurassic seas. The fine-grained sediments and anoxic conditions prevented scavengers from disturbing the bodies and allowed exceptional preservation of soft tissues and body outlines. We can actually see traces of the mother's body outline preserved as darker material around the skeleton, explains sedimentologist Dr. Abigail Parsons. This isn't just bones but a shadow of the actual body, including indications of the birth canal and possibly even the amniotic sac around the unborn young. The preservational environment was so perfect that we're seeing details normally lost in the fossil record. Microscopic analysis of the mother's skeleton reveals signs of physiological stress, including demineralized areas in her pelvic region that suggest calcium was being mobilized for the developing embryos, a process observed in modern pregnant reptiles. The babies show fully developed skeletal features, confirming they were full-term and ready for birth. The specimen provides unprecedented insights into ichthyosaur reproductive biology and has implications for understanding the evolution of live birth in aquatic reptiles. It demonstrates that these ancient marine reptiles had already evolved a highly specialized reproductive strategy by the early Jurassic, complete with multiple offspring per pregnancy and tail-first delivery. What makes this fossil so scientifically valuable is that it answers questions we couldn't address through skeletal anatomy alone, notes paleobiologist Dr. Vincent Riley. We knew ichthyosaurs gave live birth based on other fossils showing embryos inside adult specimens, but this one shows us the actual process, the mechanics and challenges of marine reptile birth. It's like witnessing an ancient obstetrical emergency frozen in time. Perhaps most remarkably, the fossil indirectly documents behavior that would otherwise be completely lost to time. The tail-first birth strategy represents a behavioral adaptation we would never deduce from skeletal anatomy alone. Only by capturing the birth in progress does this evidence become preserved in the fossil record. For modern viewers, the fossil carries emotional weight beyond its scientific significance. The universal experience of birth, with all its risk and promise, creates an immediate connection across 180 million years. We recognize in this ancient mother the same biological imperative that drives all life, the effort to continue one's lineage, sometimes at the cost of one's own survival. When I show this fossil to students, the room always goes quiet, reflects Rayleigh. There's something profoundly moving about seeing this mother in her final moment, attempting to bring new life into the world. It reminds us that even creatures from the deep past weren't just anatomical machines but living beings experiencing the fundamental processes of life and death, just as we do today. In a single limestone slab, we witness the end of one generation and the thwarted beginning of the next, birth and death entangled in a moment that has outlasted the species itself. The Permian mass death, when 259 million species died at once in a remote corner of southwest China's Yunnan province, lies what paleontologists call the Permian Pompeii, a 10-meter square excavation that captures hundreds of marine creatures caught in the single deadliest moment in Earth's history. The Permian Triassic mass extinction event that wiped out over 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates approximately 252 million years ago. Unlike other fossil deposits that accumulate over thousands or millions of years, This extraordinary sight represents a single mass death event. Within a layer of sediment only centimeters thick, paleontologists have documented over 250 individual organisms representing at least 11 different species, all apparently killed simultaneously and rapidly buried. What makes this site unique is that we're not looking at an accumulation of dead organisms over time. We're seeing a community that died together in what appears to be a matter of hours, explains Dr. Vincent Rees, lead researcher on the excavation. It's as if someone pressed pause on an entire marine ecosystem at the exact moment of its collapse. The fossilized community includes fish frozen in contorted positions with gaping mouths and arched spines, signs of acute environmental stress, likely from sudden oxygen depletion or rapid changes in water chemistry. Alongside them are crinoids, sea lilies, with their feeding arms fully extended, brachiopods with their shells open, and even delicate soft-bodied organisms rarely preserved in the fossil record. Taphonomic evidence points to rapid burial during an environmental catastrophe. A thin layer of volcanic ash directly beneath the fossil bed suggests the role of volcanism, likely from the massive Siberian Traps eruptions that many scientists believe triggered the Permian extinction through greenhouse gas emissions and subsequent environmental cascades. These animals didn't just die, they died in apparent agony, notes marine paleontologist Dr. Alyssa Preston. The fish show evidence of hypoxic stress. Their arched bodies and open mouths suggest they were gasping for oxygen in their final moments. We see similar stress postures in modern fish killed by sudden deoxygenation events like algal blooms. Microscopic analysis of the sediments reveals additional clues about this ancient mass death. The presence of framboidal pyrite, tiny, raspberry-shaped clusters of iron sulfide, indicates anoxic conditions, a complete lack of oxygen in the water. Chemical analysis shows elevated levels of mercury, a signature of volcanic activity, and evidence of rapid acidification in the form of dissolved carbonate structures. What makes this site so scientifically significant is how it captures not just individual deaths but an entire ecosystem in collapse. The fossil bed includes representatives from multiple trophic levels: primary producers, filter feeders, and predators. Their simultaneous death suggests a catastrophic failure of the entire marine system. We're essentially witnessing the marine equivalent of Pompeii, explains Rees. Just as Vesuvius preserved an entire Roman town in a moment of disaster, this site preserves an entire Permian marine community at the moment extinction overtook it. The difference is that while Pompeii was a localized disaster, what we're seeing here was happening globally, the single greatest biological crisis in Earth's history. The precise dating of this fossil layer to 251.9 million years ago places it exactly at the Permian-Triassic boundary, the geological marker of mass extinction. This timing confirms that these creatures were among the last representatives of the Paleozoic marine fauna before the biosphere reset and the evolutionary story of the Mesozoic era began. Recent geochemical analysis of the site has detected traces of compounds associated with extreme anoxia, including hydrogen sulfide, a toxic gas that can build up in oxygen-depleted waters. This supports the hypothesis that hydrogen sulfide poisoning may have been one of the kill mechanisms during the Permian extinction, as upwelling deep waters brought toxic chemicals to shallow marine environments. What's perhaps most disturbing about this fossil bed is how it mirrors modern concerns about ocean deoxygenation and acidification, notes Preston. The environmental stresses that killed these creatures 252 million years ago, oxygen depletion, acidification, rapid warming, are the same stresses affecting marine ecosystems today due to climate change, just at a slower rate. It's a sobering reminder of the Earth system's capacity for dramatic change. The arrangement of the fossils themselves tells a story of desperation. Some fish appear to be oriented toward what would have been the water's surface, suggesting they were swimming upward in search of oxygenated water that no longer existed. Filter-feeding organisms have their feeding structures fully deployed, indicating they were actively feeding when disaster struck. There's a particularly haunting aspect to this fossil bed, reflects Rees. These animals represent some of the final moments of the Paleozoic era, the end of evolutionary lineages that had dominated Earth's oceans for over 300 million years. When we look at them, we're seeing the conclusion of one of life's great chapters and the prelude to a very different world that would emerge in the Triassic. Unlike most fossils that represent individual deaths, this assemblage captures death at an ecosystem scale, a rare glimpse into mass extinction as it happened, organism by organism, species by species. It forces us to confront the reality that entire biological systems can fail rapidly under sufficient environmental pressure, and that evolution's story includes not just gradual change but catastrophic resets. As Preston observes, these creatures died together in what must have seemed like the end of the world, and in a very real sense, for the Paleozoic biosphere, it was. When death tells the story of life standing in the hushed gallery of a natural history museum, gazing at the fighting dinosaurs fossil, predator and prey locked in eternal combat, we experience a profound collision of timescales. Our minutes spent observing represent an infinitesimal fraction of the 80 million years these creatures have remained joined in their final moment. Yet something about death fossils collapses this vast temporal gulf, creating an almost uncomfortable intimacy between observer and observed. These specimens speak to us differently than other fossils, reflects paleontologist Dr. Avery Peterson. A standard fossil tells us an animal existed. A death fossil tells us it lived. It had relationships, behaviors, struggles, and ultimately an ending. These are not just anatomical data points, but biographical fragments. What makes these 8 fossil deaths so scientifically revolutionary is their exceptional preservation of behavior, the most elusive aspect of extinct organisms. Bones can tell us about structure. Teeth can suggest diet. Footprints might indicate gait or speed. But actual interactions between ancient creatures, caught in the moment, these are paleontological gold. Each of these fossils required a perfect confluence of unlikely events. A dramatic death, immediate burial, specific chemical conditions, and the absence of scavengers or disturbance. This taphonomic lottery had to hit the jackpot not just once but at precisely the right moment to capture these dramatic endings. Yet beyond their scientific significance lies something more profound. These fossils force us to confront mortality not as an abstract concept but as a universal constant that connects all life across the vast expanse of Earth's history. The ichthyosaur mother dying in childbirth, the oviraptor protecting its nest until the end, the Permian marine creatures gasping their last breaths together. These are not just data points but stories that resonate with our own understanding of existence. There's something deeply humbling about these specimens, notes Dr. Victoria Ramirez. They remind us that death is not unique to humans or even to our geological moment. It has been the companion of life since life began, the inevitable counterweight to existence that has touched every creature that has ever lived on this planet. Perhaps most striking is how these ancient deaths reveal the continuity of life's patterns. The behaviors we witness, predation, parental care, reproduction, struggle, have remained remarkably consistent across hundreds of millions of years, despite the endless turnover of species. The ichthyosaur giving tail-first birth used the same strategy modern dolphins employ. The oviraptor brooding its nest mirrored behaviors we see in birds today. This continuity suggests something profound about the fundamental nature of life, that certain solutions to biological challenges are so effective they evolve independently again and again, creating echoes and parallels across vastly different organisms separated by eons of time. The 8 death fossils in this exploration, the fighting dinosaurs, the pregnant plesiosaur, the ashfall rhinos, the fish choking on its prey, the redeemed oviraptor parent, the wasp attacking a spider in amber, the ichthyosaur dying in childbirth, and the mass Permian death, collectively reframe our understanding of the fossil record. They transform it from a catalog of ancient anatomy into a library of ancient lives, complete with their dramatic conclusions. As we continue developing more sophisticated techniques to analyze these specimens, from synchrotron imaging that can detect trace elements to molecular studies that can identify ancient proteins, these death scenes will likely yield even more insights about the lives they represent. The final chapter, it seems, often tells us the most about the entire story. In the end, these fossils remind us that despite all that separates us from the ancient creatures that preceded us, millions of years, radical anatomical differences, entirely different ecosystems, we share with them the most universal of all experiences, life that ultimately ends. And in that ending, whether dramatic or quiet, violent or peaceful, each organism leaves behind some trace of its existence, perhaps to be discovered millions of years later by curious minds trying to understand the vast, continuous story of life on Earth. As we stand before these ancient endings preserved in stone, we glimpse not just how creatures died but how they lived, their struggles, relationships, and behaviors frozen at the moment when individual stories ended but entered the greater narrative of Earth's biological history, reminding us that in death, as in life, we are all connected through time by the unbroken thread of evolution's grand experiment.